We're recording.
Cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's TOC meeting. We've got a few items on the agenda, so it's picking up, which is excellent to see. So we've got review actions from last week, an update on charters for working groups, support for working group operations, and there's a sub-point on that one of Application Runtime Platform Working Group has their first forum. Yay. The request for comments process, working agreement PR review, and that concludes of GitHub Teams and Access, PR workflow, project roadmap, Stalebot, and any other business. So well, I guess the most sensible place to kick off is at the start with reviewing the actions from last week. So we had some reviews and updates to do. So the first review that we had was for add a directory for current approved working groups, which is 158, and we'll just post that in the chat as well. Okay, so I've reviewed that one, and Eric has submitted that one, so has reviewed by default. But we're still lacking a few reviews on there. Do we think we'll be able to get through? David?
I just realized I haven't reviewed it or seen it, so thanks.
Okay, cool. So I think we should probably end up carrying that one forward to next week then.
I guess it's also slightly out of date because it doesn't have services management. That is a bit of a moving target.
Yes.
But I mean, we could merge it as is and then add that later if I don't get a chance to add it.
So the purpose of this is to have an index that will always be out of date compared to a folder full of things that are always correct. True, to be sarcastic as much as possible.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with caches.
I know, I'm just saying, like, questioning fundamentally the purpose of a thing, which can be derived from the contents of a folder. Is it like, what problem are you trying to solve there? Like hoping that somebody brand new can like see the structure?
Yeah, having a more consolidated index of what's there, where to go. I think there's another element of this. This is setting out something that isn't in the charters about labeling the repos that the working groups govern with a particular topic.
Yeah, good point. Which of course could be put in the charters. I mean, I think the problem you're trying to solve is an indexing problem, like a table of contents problem, which will always be a bit out of date, but we're not going to add and remove working groups that often. So
yeah, I think the cache is worth it in this case.
Yeah, discoverability is often the hardest thing when starting.
A counterpoint, you just read the contents of all of the files in a folder. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, that's very accessible.
There's no Slack or projects or anything in the charter that was merged from mine. So it's different information at least.
Yeah.
Maybe
totally,
we're supposed to duplicate that information in the charter, but it has not happened yet, at least.
Yeah, that's true. I think this maybe is the only place where like a link to the particular journal doc for the working group is maintained, unless that's included in, say, a working group specific subdirectory under this folder. But I think there's some benefit to having this uniformity too.
Okay. Cool. So, all right, we're going to carry that one forward to next week then. Okay, so then we've got 162, which is add Cloud Foundry Incubator / Bosch Backup and Restore to Foundational Infrastructure Working Group. So we've got 3 reviews on this one, and it's been open for more than a week, or a week. Does anyone see any reason to not click merge? Cool. That's clicked. Excellent. So then there was an update to 151, which is the vulnerabilities working group, which I have done a bit of work with Paul on that one. And we now have contact details for almost everybody apart from one individual.
I reached out to this one individual and first asked this individual if he's aware of that he's listed here, and second to provide me with a GitHub handle or best directly on the PR. So I hope that this gets resolved soon.
Okay. In order to not hold it up, I wouldn't be averse to merging and then creating a subsequent one just to update contact details for one person.
Stefan, did that person actually respond to acknowledge that they're aware of this and they want to be involved?
Not yet. I know that Matthias is involved in security, but I don't know if he was involved in all this TOC thing. And before adding him, it would be, well, nice. But I sent it out, I think today, so it's I didn't receive yet an answer.
Okay,
Yeah,
maybe we should leave it open.
Meeting, I went through the yeah. Let's leave it open. That would be polite. Otherwise, we would have to remove him and then add later. That's also possible. I don't want to block something.
Okay, yeah, we can leave this one open for another week. No problem with that one at all. Okay, cool. That's there and that's there. So let's just grab that one and move that over to okay. So then some of the other action items, we have agenda topics for those, so we'll have a look at those at that point. I think makes the most sense there. Okay, so an update on the charters for working groups for any that we haven't covered off.
I had a chance to talk to Melinda, one of the folks who VMware has contributing to docs. And it sounds like she can dedicate some time to participating in that. So I think I'm going to try to work with her asynchronously about fleshing out that charter. Ram, I know you had also mentioned that there might be some other folks that could be interested in participating in the working group.
Not so much other folks as much as if there's anything we can do to help in terms of just the message.
Yeah, sure. Makes sense. Okay. So maybe we're at a point where we can start formulating the scope of that working group and put out a call in the community for other folks who might be interested.
Okay.
I think one thing I was also realizing is that we've had some inconsistency in terms of really who's had primary responsibility for some of those docs repos. I think for maybe the majority of them, there've been dedicated docs writers who'd been doing a lot of the management of those, especially for a lot of the kind of core app runtime concerns. Whereas Bosch has been completely different in that it has just always had ownership and control of its docs. So this might also be a good point to consider whether we want to make that more consistent. Would we want to delegate more responsibility for docs sections that are focused on one working group or a subset of working groups within that working group? And maybe just have some reduced scope of responsibility about like underlying doc support from that community experience working group. So I think that's one thing that we can probably just try hashing out as we try drafting the charter for that and see how it feels, and maybe ping some of the working groups that are up and running about what they might prefer as we bring forth all the docs assets into the light.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Okay. That one. Then there's reference deployments working group, which is an interesting one to have a look at. Oh, hang on, there's something strange. No, no, that's still been marked as a work in progress. Yeah, so 139, I'll just post that in chat.
Yeah, this was the first one we thought we were going to get done.
And everybody voted it's ready, but well, there's the most important part still missing, right?
Yes. Yeah, so this one's an interesting one to move forward. I'm going to suggest that we actually have a bit of time to reread this one and then figure out a plan of attack to move it forwards. Yay? No? Yay? Okay, cool.
I guess the content and the charter and the list of repositories, okay, that's maybe minor thing to work through. The critical problem is to find somebody who takes care of this working group, a work group lead, and then the rest will probably fall.
Yeah.
that's a tricky thing.
I sort of feel in its current state, it might terrify anybody that looks at it.
Well, I think in terms of the technical asset scope, we've since had discussions about no one really stepping forward to maintain kubectf and quirks, so we can take those out. So that would reduce the scope some. I think also CF for Kate, since we drafted this, we've decided that's really going to be in maintenance mode until the new CF on Kate's effort reaches an equivalent milestone of stability. So that's maybe a grayer area, because I know a couple of folks have been doing a little bit of upkeep on that in their spare time, just to keep it functional at the place where it is right now.
Okay.
We also have a couple of approvers that I think would be ready to join. What we do not have is leadership. So I could edit the PR to throw in a couple of approvers. But that doesn't solve the leads problem.
No, true. Okay. I think the right thing to do is to get it to reflect current status and then move forward from there, because there has been some time pass and some things have changed in between, and then see if we can find someone to take that wonderful leadership role. Okay, so anything else on the working groups as is?
I think we have an alternative too. If there's no leadership, we can kind of deprecate CF deployment, right? And we can say it's for dev and test, it's a non-prod deployment of Cloud Foundry that we can use in order to accelerate our own internal development, but it might not be suitable for, it's not really maintained. It's maintained only insofar as it provides value to the people working on Cloud Foundry. It's not an actual reference deployment anymore that anyone should feel safe running.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think we still either need to have it in a working group eventually, or it gets archived because nobody owns it.
Yeah, sure. I agree. Archive is the alternative then, huh? But then we can't use it for internal abilities or whatnot. Somebody can fork it and just use it for their own purposes and be like, this is my fork of CF deployment that lets me develop Cappy or whatever. I guess where would it go? Let's say we remove the ability to have a reference deployment of Cloud Foundry that you can rely on. It becomes a tool for testing and playing around with. Where does it go? If there's no dedicated working group for it. Potentially into like runtime interfaces, but it changes its scope or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't belong anywhere. Cats could go into deployment like runtime interfaces because it's kind of like testing the interface. It's conformance validation of the interface.
Closest probably, yeah. I think we had this discussion in the beginning where cats and smoke tests should go to the CF deployment or to the interfaces. It's something in between, right? Back then with Eric, we said, let's put it here, but.
I mean, now that we have a bit more of a division between kind of the existing components that run on VMs and the CF on Kate's focus could potentially go into App Runtime Platform. Although also again that's adding scope to that working group that's already pretty big. So I see Amelia probably not a big fan of that additional expansion. Although it's also been pretty stable. We've had folks that have been keeping it up to date and maintaining it, but there hasn't really been any feature development on it in quite a long time, really. It just kind of keep it up to date with the releases. I guess we've acknowledged that there is still work to do to transition it to use Bionic as the default and to set up the CI for it. So this kind of like one-time cost that we still haven't paid down.
And we'll never upgrade the operating system again, so probably be fine unless there's another one-time cost coming up soon.
That would never happen. Yeah.
And we're thinking about trying to move some CI resources into Foundation end accounts. That probably won't add any additional cost to moving the CI pipelines over.
Yeah.
I think from time to time there are some features like there was just the release of CF deployment 17, which brings some changes in the routing and nuts so that MTLS is used and not plain text anymore. So this is a cross-cutting concern between different teams, and the integration actually happens here. So
yeah,
if we drop CF deployment and the processes, I guess we drop a lot more than just this one. That's my feeling. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking, does this actually really warrant getting it up to date and then its own section to really dig into? Because it has fairly wide-reaching implications, whatever we do with it.
I mean, I think we have a good strategy. It's just that no one's taking the bait to like sign up to lead the thing, right? Like I think it being separated with cats, there's enough scope in there that it's a small to medium-sized project that has independent value. So what happened to vendors that were going to lead this? There was a discussion, some folks signed up to lead it. Where are we on that? Like, Eric, you remember this? Where did that land?
Oh, where did the discussion for like people that would own this land?
Yeah, somebody had volunteered to lead it or come up with a lead for it, but I don't remember the full story.
Oh, I think we heard many months ago that there was some discussion at a governing board meeting where maybe somebody blinked and said that they would provide some resources, but then that never actually materialized.
But maybe that's a strategy. If we think that the project is important, but we cannot find at the moment a lead, then maybe it's something we can give to the governance board and ask for help. I mean, That's a typical reaction I
Mm.
would do in a company, right? If I cannot solve the problem, I try to escalate. That usually helps.
Yeah.
We do have a governing board meeting next Wednesday, the 17th. So that could be something we discuss for sure. And it was, we did realize somewhat recently that we had neglected to invite Lee here to the governing board, but as our charter states, he has a seat on that board and should represent the TOC. So he has been invited to that meeting next week. We're gonna meet all sorts of nice fellows, and yeah, we can. I mean, I would think during that meeting it would be a good time for you to update them on just general happenings of the TOC, but also any concerns like this would be a great time to bring that up and try and move some action there. They have discussed this a little bit too, but this would give them a nice nudge, I think.
Cool. All right. I think that seems like a sensible thing to do then in that case.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So
Maybe
if we-
one just easy things regarding. I just bring the PR to the chat regarding the interfaces working group. A small addition that maybe can be solved just right away. Add setbolts as approver for copy area. I'm definitely fine with it. I guess nobody will veto -1 here. Then it's done. There's another change. CF Linux FS3 is not yet part in any working group. I guess it belongs to the interfaces working group after the discussion with the build packs. But here, Greg wanted to double check with the build packs team whether this is the right area or not. So I guess we just wait a bit until we have this feedback. But sounds reasonable, yeah, from my point of view.
I'm on that thread. I might be able to tell you the answer, but I think the answer is yes. That was. Sorry, I'll get back to you all in a second with hopefully a yes, and we can merge that in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have now, I think on the one of setbolts enough +1s, then I going to merge it, and this one is done. Thanks.
Cool. Okay, so support for working group operations, and the Application Runtime Platform Working Group has their first forum.
Yay. We had it, but I didn't want to make another suggestion since I don't have edit access. Yeah, went well. I'm happy we finally got it kicked off.
Cool.
And I was really happy with the attendance, especially from our SAP friends who I don't see very often. Not on Zoom. I interact with you, but I don't actually see you very often.
Everything all okay from access to things? Perfect. Perfect. Okay, cool. Anybody got anything else on the support for working group operations thread?
I'm getting a GCP platform set up, GCP project set up for the the CF on Kate's working group.
Cool.
The project's actually already created. I just need to get the LFIT to set up billing properly before I give people access. So anyway, that should be done this week. And if other working groups also need GCP resources, they should reach out to me.
Okay, excellent. So the next big chunky thing that we got was around the request for comments process. So last week I did flag up one of the AlphaGov approaches as to how things are done over there, because I'm nice and familiar with that. I will just drop that in the chat as well. So that's the AlphaGov approach. Did everyone get a chance to have a nosy through that or not?
I did not have time, unfortunately, to look at this in detail. Would it be worth giving like a quick tour of it to us?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a fairly simple PRing approach in here. So there's actually a template that exists already, to which people take a copy of that template and don't number it at this particular point, but give it an appropriate title in there. They then add any images into one of the into a directory if that's required as part of the request for comments. They then create a PR on that branch, and it's down to the individual that has created that PR to champion it and get people to interact with it. So, in our case, it's going to be going out via Slack and poking people accordingly. By all means, issues that are relevant as well within particular working groups, and then pushing it through that way. As changes are requested, then feeding those into the PR as part of the process rather than stacking everything up to the end, and remaining active throughout the process to the point of where it's accepted or rejected. If it's accepted, then merged in. If it's closed, then as a rejected, then close it, and particularly adding in a comment about why it was rejected, so that way it's discoverable for future purpose. We've found that to work quite well, to be honest, for us. And it's a process that's pretty lightweight from an engineering perspective, in terms of it's using the tools that we're already using and workflows that are already in place, rather than having to learn something new or put something somewhere else. Amelia?
Were you intending this for process changes or for technical decisions? Because I know we talked about splitting those up last week, or both.
So the initial thinking around this was more process initially, and maybe adopted elsewhere, may not be. And does anyone have any thoughts for or against, or me?
Sorry, Lee, my kid was distracting me for the beginning part. No, I looked through it last time a bit when you shared it. But I don't remember the full details. How does somebody propose? Like, is it a PR and there's like comments, discussions on a PR, but then like it gets merged to make a record of it? Is that the idea?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it would certainly work. I don't really enjoy trying to figure out the exact right process for many viable process options, but I'm certainly willing to go along with this. I can't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm broadly supportive of this kind of decision record mechanism, and yeah, we can maybe work out the precise details of how we'd want it to apply. I was looking over our notes from last time. I thought we had brought it up even in the context of like some of the stem cell and root-of-fest decisions. So I could see this also applying to even technical decisions that would be cross-cutting at the TOC level, or if working groups decided they wanted to adopt it for consistency, similar format with that level of scope.
Okay. Shall I prepare a PR to create the RFC approach in the community repo?
Kind of a meta RFC?
Yeah, an RFC for RFCs.
Right, it's just a template for PRs, really, right? It's like a template for PRs. And to Amelia's point, is it for technical, or this one's for process and community like so on, not like, let me ask a clarifying question. Where would something like how we do like concourses or Google budgets per working group lie? Is that a, where did like, yeah.
Technical process?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that that's something that lives in the community repo because it is cross-cutting as to how that sits.
Yeah, I mean, maybe what would have to be part of the proposal is like where within the community repo we store these, and do we make a distinction between things that are just about organizational process or technical decisions, or as David just mentioned, we have things that touch on both.
Yes.
So would we end up just unifying them?
Yeah, I like the RFC idea. I love a good template, but I think the one change I would have is to make sure it's in the community repo and not have it be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think definitely in the community repo.
I mean, we can try that. There's just one thing. The community repo is the one place we're keeping track of all cross-cutting decisions, even technical decisions like the moving to the jammy jellyfish and budgeting of the concourses and so on, versus like how we contribute and the repo settings. And I don't think we're a huge enough community where it's worth separating, because like people are just going to get it wrong. Like, we want to lower the barrier to entry and be like, don't worry, there's just one place, it's fine.
Yeah, cool. All right, I'll spend some time this week trying to figure that one out then, in that case. Okay, cool. So we got an action from there for me to do things. I'll make a note of that one. And now it seems like an appropriate point to hand over to Amelia.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for commenting on that doc we shared with the proposals. Jeff, Ruben, and I hopefully took your comments into account, and we created PRs this morning because we wanted it to be here for today, and we definitely did not forget until this morning. We turned them into PRs, which are essentially RFCs before I saw that we proposed this other RFC system. So maybe ignore the format of them for now. We can change exactly how they're formatted. But last week we talked about saying this week we would have the PRs, and then next week we would vote on them. So I'm not going to review them again. We reviewed them last week. I don't think there have been massive changes, but know that they are there for you to vote on and comment on.
Okay, cool. I don't think there's going to be any huge amount of controversy with those at all. But what I would propose that we would do on that one is to approve on there, but just not merge, and then we can tweak formatting accordingly. Okay. Cool. Well, that was nice and quick. Thank you for your hard work on making that so smooth and easy. So that leaves us with any other business.
Yeah, maybe we've already been doing a pretty good job of kind of working through salient subsets of at least the PRs on the community repo. I wonder if maybe this is also a thing that could be an initial test RFC in terms of process. Maybe we could have as a standing item just reviewing the set of open PRs and issues on the community repo, or if we end up kind of sharing it more deliberately with the working groups, the subset that would be relevant for the TOC, or the subset that isn't working group specific or something like that. Just having that as a standing agenda item for TOC meetings, so we can make sure that everything is moving forward or getting resolved.
Yeah, I think that probably sounds like a good standing action thing to do. Okay. So I think an ideal spot for that would probably be post reviewing the actions is then just reviewing the PRs. So I think that's a pretty easy one to do. So I'll just add a quick action for that one. Oh, I can't type today. Okay. Oh, we have a new joiner.
This kid's been around on these meetings. She's not that new.
I know, but
It's
normally
after your
hiding a bit
spot.
further. Oh, thank you, Amelia. Okay. Has anyone got anything else for this week?
Just an update on the Concourse thing that Chris was talking about earlier. We're trying this out. We're letting the CFRK's, like the new Cloud Foundry compatibility layer, Kubernetes CI stuff, deploy their own Concourse. We figured out, like, generally we're starting to follow de facto the up to one Concourse per working group that the community pays for, but try to keep it small. We've discovered that we can run one for about $400 a month, which is still expensive, but like we think we can afford to have one per working group at the most there in terms of Concourse overhead. That's a good blend in my mind of, like, you don't want one centralized Concourse because then nobody wants to run it because it's too much and it's too many tenants and someone's complaining and somebody else has to unstick them and so on. But you don't want one per project or one per team because they're pretty high overhead. So we think that's like a good, I don't know who operates it. It's really easy for that one working group because it's really just like one thing and one set of people. But like in Amelia's working group or something, like, you know, Amelia, know that we are going to probably open up the one Concourse option for you all to have a community paid for Concourse and some number of CF deployments. And I want to create a proposal for how we budget those CF deployments and such with, like, Chris and so on. We'll come up with some amount of community paid for resources.
I will say it took us months to just move our concourses all to one other concourse. And I do not think there's a lot of appetite to, again, port everything over somewhere else. So I'm happy to push that one down the road and continue spending VMware's money.
This is going to go real well, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I don't think there's an urgency there. I also do think that shared CI concourses is definitely something that governing board and you all will think is a worthwhile use of CFF funds. So you know, yeah, we should watch the dollars, but we'll find a way to pay for whatever is needed for that.
Chris, I think it's going to be your responsibility to watch the dollars somehow. So you probably, when you're creating these projects, want to decide what you think a reasonable spending limit is and try to figure out how to market. Right. There, we did that already, kind of with the shared Bosch stem cell testing CI, and that was a lot higher, right? But we'll set up notifications for, you know, when it hits X amount per month, and then there'll be like a cutoff amount that'll be much higher. But you know, we'll have a sense of that, and I'll check in with the groups to see like what's a reasonable amount for each of those things. If you think, you know, $600 a month is kind of what we expect, you know, I'll set a warning sign when we hit $800 or $1,000, but won't cut anything off unless it hits like $4,000 and something's clearly like just broke and it's going haywire or something. But like we'll figure all that out, make whatever makes sense.
Okay, cool. Anybody for anything else?
Have we figured out how we're going to roll out? So let's say we go along with this proposals to change the repo access rules for like PR only workflows and such. Do we know what our options are for actually rolling that out globally? Is this easy to execute across the board once we make the decision, or do we have to write code? Like, what's the strategy?
I think Ruben would have the best answer for that since he's been doing all the Terraform scripting. And I think he knows much better what things can be scripted and what things can't. Or what things Terraform already supports, you know, changing.
Yeah, it might be an org-wide setting too, right? There's like org-wide settings that, and you can use GraphQL to bulk update all the repos too, which I've seen people do. So there's exciting options. I'm just wondering how hard it is to roll out some of these changes. I guess that doesn't really matter, right? We're trying to decide, should we do it?
Well, rather handily, there was a GitHub enterprise org change the other day that enables creating custom repository roles. So I'll just posted that in the chat, because that might prove quite handy.
I was also wondering, like, if we're talking about that thing which I brought up, sorry, which is that proposal to change our repo access rules, which I do think is important. Do we really think that this PR workflow makes sense for all repositories? Or are we talking about code versus test, like versus docs versus, like, are we trying to differentiate it all by type of repository, where we're like, you should be free to edit the CI repo, but not the production code repo? Or does anybody want to make that amendment to this proposal idea, or do we think we can treat all the repositories the same?
And your advantage in treating them all the same means that you've got a consistent workflow process, regardless of which repo you're working on, and it reduces the foot cannon of using the wrong process and potentially breaking something else. And does that help, again, reduce barrier to entry, knowing that it's a PR workflow, they're all a PR workflow?
I guess so. Like, what's the barrier to entry on making a private CI repo change? Like there's a set of repositories that are not, that are for people working on the thing or maintaining the infrastructure for the thing, which might be different, right, than production code repositories or even docs repositories. But I think those are probably not very common. So I think we could have a default, and we could always consider saying for repositories that are not actually designed to be managed as part of the product, then you can have a different, or private repos have a different workflow or whatever, right? Like, maybe there's some really easy statement to be made there. I was just imagining, like, oh, I want to make a change to Concourse, which I already fly updated. Why am I sending a PR to reflect the after the fact change that I made? The pipeline's already been updated, and now I'm PRing in a change. And I'm like, well, that might be also in service of a feature. Like, how do you coordinate 5 PRs to 5 different repos, which all represent one feature? I think we actually have experience with this with like HTTP2 already. So I don't think that's actually that hard. I think I'm not just used to this new workflow, so I'm like panicking about it a little bit. And I think people in the community who are working on these repos currently, should really evaluate how it's going to impact them, and see if like I tried to get Greg to pay attention to this one. I'm like, oh, this one's going to really affect us. Everyone who's working in these areas and not doing these workflows for all repositories is definitely going to be affected. So like, read it. Don't necessarily, we're going to probably do it, but like, know that it's going to affect you, and see if there's some way to tweak it to make it less impactful if that's advantageous.
I think I'm happy for that tweaking to come after the fact. I think people aren't going to pay attention to this until they're like, oh, wait, now I'm getting blocked. And then we'll write something that says, these repos are different.
Yeah, the classic, this change is terrible. Why did no one tell me about this change? Well, it was there. Damn.
Yeah, but for this one, I feel like I want to make sure everybody sees it and has a chance to give feedback, versus a lot of the PRs like only affect a small number of people, or people just aren't going to care because they're not going to be that impacted. But this one's going to impact everybody. So I want
Yeah, well, worst case scenario, you get on Slack and you're like, hey, other approver who I definitely know because there's only 3 of us on this project, please merge this.
And that other approver's like out of office till December 5th.
Okay, that must be European.
Who would do that?
You need to call your American approvers.
Okay. All right. Have we got anything else for this week then? If not, then we might as well gain 13 minutes. Cool.
Thanks,
all
everyone.
right. Thank you very much, all, and catch you next week.